Captain Jake Morrison floated in his chair, staring at the massive ship on his screen. In 20 years of salvage work, he had never seen anything like it. The vessel was huge, 3 times bigger than any human warship. Its dark metal hull looked like it ate light instead of reflecting it. No power readings, no life signs, no answer to their calls. Just empty silence in the black of space. Morrison's salvage ship, the Lucky Strike, moved closer to the dead giant. His second officer, Lisa Carter, ran the scanners again and again. The alien ship's shape was strange, with smooth curves and bumps that looked almost alive. What made Morrison's skin crawl were the huge tears in the hull. They looked like claw marks, as if something had ripped its way out from inside. "Captain, this doesn't feel right," Lisa said, her voice tight with worry. "The damage patterns are all wrong. This ship was attacked from the inside out." Morrison nodded but kept his eyes on the screen. Something about the ship called to him. Maybe it was the way it drifted so peacefully in the void. Or maybe it was the fortune in alien tech waiting inside. Either way, he had to know what happened here. "Prep the boarding pod," Morrison said. "I'm going over." "Sir, we don't know what killed the crew," Danny Wells, his chief engineer, said from his station. "Could be disease, could be some kind of weapon we've never seen." "Could be a lot of things," Morrison agreed. "But sitting here guessing won't pay the bills." Morrison suited up with his small team. Besides Danny, he brought Amy Parker, his security chief. 3 people seemed like enough for a quick look around. If they found anything dangerous, they could always come back with more firepower. The boarding pod attached to the alien ship's airlock with a soft thud. Morrison expected to have to cut their way in, but the airlock opened easily. Red emergency lights flickered on as they stepped inside, casting long shadows down the corridor. "Well, that's not creepy at all," Amy muttered, checking her weapon. The inside of the ship was like walking through a living thing. The walls curved and flowed like they had grown instead of being built. Strange patterns ran along the surfaces, sometimes glowing faintly before fading back to darkness. The air was breathable but smelled of ozone and something floral that Morrison couldn't identify. They found what looked like a control room, though the panels and screens were nothing like human technology. Symbols danced across dark displays, appearing and disappearing too fast to read. Morrison touched one of the surfaces and felt a slight vibration, as if the ship was purring. "These readings don't make sense," Danny said, studying his scanner. "The ship's dead, but there's still some kind of energy flowing through it." As they moved deeper into the vessel, Morrison noticed the corridors seemed to change. Passages that had been on his left were now on his right. Rooms appeared where there had been walls before. It was like the ship was rearranging itself around them. "Guys?" Amy's voice came through the comm, sounding confused. "I can't find the way back to the airlock." Morrison checked his own position. According to his map, he should be able to see Danny's suit light from here, but the corridor ahead was empty. Somehow they had all gotten separated. "Stay calm," Morrison said over the comm. "The ship's playing tricks on us. Mark your positions and wait for me to find you." But Morrison didn't wait. Something was pulling him forward, deeper into the ship's heart. He followed the feeling down a corridor that seemed to stretch forever. The walls here pulsed with a faint blue light, and he could swear he heard something like a heartbeat echoing through the metal. The corridor ended at a massive chamber that took Morrison's breath away. The room was filled with crystal formations that reached from floor to ceiling. Each crystal glowed with its own inner light, creating a forest of beautiful alien trees. And in the center of it all, suspended in a column of soft light, was her. She looked almost human, but not quite. Her skin was pale and seemed to glow from within. Her hair floated around her head like she was underwater. Her eyes were closed, but Morrison could see they were too large, too bright to be human. She was beautiful in a way that made his chest tight. As Morrison stepped closer, he realized she was breathing. Barely, but breathing. The crystal chamber was some kind of life support system, keeping her alive, but only just. The light around her flickered and dimmed like a candle about to go out. Morrison reached out to touch the crystal barrier, and her eyes snapped open. They were the color of starlight, silver and deep. When she looked at him, Morrison felt something shift in his mind. It was like she was reaching into his thoughts, but gently, carefully. Then she spoke, but not with words. Her voice appeared directly in his head, carrying with it feelings of desperate hope and terrible loneliness. "Please," she said without speaking. "I have been waiting so long for someone to find me. I am dying, and I am so very tired of being alone." Morrison's hand pressed against the crystal, and something electric passed between them. The woman's eyes widened, and for a moment the light around her grew brighter. "Who are you?" Morrison asked, not sure if he spoke aloud or just thought the words. "I am the last," she replied, her mental voice growing stronger. "I am the ship, and the ship is me. My people called me something you could not pronounce, but you may call me Nova. I have been sleeping for so long, dreaming of the day someone would wake me." Morrison felt her sadness, her loneliness, her hope. He understood that this being was the ship's consciousness, its living heart. And she was dying, had been dying for centuries, waiting for someone to find her. "What happened to your people?" Morrison asked. Images flashed through his mind. A beautiful world with cities that floated in the clouds, people who looked like Nova, graceful and wise. Then darkness, things that ate light and life itself. A war that lasted generations, a final desperate flight among the stars. "They are gone," Nova said simply. "All gone. I am the last memory of my race." Morrison looked at the dying woman in the crystal chamber and made a decision that would change everything. He was going to help her no matter what it cost him. Morrison pressed his gloved hand against the crystal wall and everything changed. Power flowed between them like lightning, but it didn't hurt. Instead, it felt warm, alive, like touching another person's soul. Nova's eyes grew brighter, and her form became more solid inside the crystal chamber. But the connection worked both ways. Morrison suddenly felt Nova's memories flooding into his mind. He saw her world as it used to be, with floating cities that sparkled like jewels in the sky. He saw her people, tall and graceful, living in harmony with nature and technology. They called themselves the Zephyrians, and they had built a civilization that spanned 100 worlds. Then he saw the darkness come. The devourers arrived like a plague of locusts, but worse. They didn't just destroy planets or kill people. They ate everything. Matter, energy, even the life force itself. Where they passed, nothing remained but empty space, not even dust or gas. Entire star systems simply ceased to exist. "We fought them for 300 years, Nova's voice whispered in Morrison's mind. "But how do you fight something that eats reality itself?" Morrison watched through Nova's memories as the Zephyrian fleets fell one by one. Their most advanced weapons, their greatest minds, their most powerful ships all meant nothing against an enemy that could simply unmake them from existence. "This ship was our last hope," Nova continued. "The eternal dream, we called it. Our scientists performed a ritual, binding the life force of the entire crew to the ship itself. We thought if we could merge with the vessel, we could escape the devourers." Morrison saw the desperate final moments. Hundreds of Zephyrians standing in chambers like this one, willingly giving up their bodies to become part of the ship. Their physical forms died, but their consciousness merged with the vessel's systems, creating something new. A living ship powered by the combined will of an entire people. "It worked for a time," Nova said sadly. "We escaped the devourers and fled into deep space. But the ritual came with a price. One by one, my people's spirits faded away. The ship kept us alive, but we were still dying, just very slowly." Morrison felt her pain as she showed him the long centuries of loneliness, voices that had once filled the ship's corridors growing quiet one by one. Friends and family members simply fading away until only Nova remained, the last echo of a dead civilization. "Why didn't you fade too?" Morrison asked. "I was the ship's heart," Nova replied, "the central consciousness that held everything together. I could not die while the ship lived, and the ship could not live if I died. So I endured alone, waiting for someone to find us." Morrison understood now why the ship had seemed alive, why the corridors changed and moved. Nova was the ship, and the ship was Nova. Every wall, every system, every flickering light was part of her body. Through their connection, Morrison also felt Nova learning about him. She saw his life, his memories, his people. She experienced human emotions that her race had never known. The fierce loyalty Morrison felt for his crew. The stubborn determination that made humans refuse to give up even when everything seemed hopeless. "Your people are strange," Nova said, and Morrison felt her curiosity like a warm glow. "You feel so strongly, love so fiercely. My people were wise and peaceful, but we were also cold. We valued knowledge over emotion, logic over passion. Perhaps that is why we fell so easily to the devourers." Morrison felt something else through their link. Hope. For the first time in centuries, Nova had hope. Not just because she wasn't alone anymore, but because she sensed something in Morrison and his people that her own race had lacked. "What do you need?" Morrison asked. "How can I help you?" "The connection we share is already helping," Nova replied. "Your life force is feeding into the ship's systems, giving me strength I haven't felt in ages. But it's not enough. The ship is too damaged, too old. I need more power, more life energy." Morrison understood what she was asking. She needed his crew, needed them to form the same kind of connection he had made. But that was dangerous. He didn't know what joining with an alien consciousness might do to a human mind. "I won't force anyone," Morrison said firmly. "But I can ask them. I can explain." Nova's gratitude washed over him like a wave. "You would risk your people for me? A stranger from a dead race?" "You're not dead," Morrison replied. "You're right here talking to me. And as long as you're alive, your people aren't gone either." Through their link, Morrison felt Nova's wonder at his words. Her people had thought in terms of survival and logic, but Morrison spoke of hope and defiance against impossible odds. It was a very human way of thinking. "There is something else," Nova said, her mental voice growing worried. "The connection we made, it sent out a signal, a pulse of energy that traveled far beyond this system. The devourers will have felt it. They will come looking for us." Morrison felt a chill of fear, but also something else. Excitement. The thrill of a challenge. "How long do we have?" "Days, perhaps weeks. Time enough to repair some of the ship's systems, but not enough to fully restore it to fighting condition." Morrison smiled, though Nova couldn't see it through his helmet. "Lady, you've never seen what humans can do when we're backed into a corner. Days might be enough." Through their connection, Nova felt Morrison's confidence, his absolute refusal to accept defeat. It was alien to her, but also inspiring. For the first time since her people died, Nova began to believe that maybe, just maybe, they had a chance. Morrison's connection with Nova had changed everything. Through their shared link, he could feel the ship's systems like they were part of his own body. When he thought about the lights in the corridor, they grew brighter. When he wondered about the air quality, the ship's filters worked harder. It was like having a computer that responded to his thoughts instead of his fingers. But more than that, Morrison found he could understand the alien technology that had baffled human scientists for decades. Nova's knowledge flowed into his mind, showing him how Zephyrian science worked. Where humans built machines with metal and circuits, the Zephyrians grew their technology like living things. Their ships weren't just vessels, they were partners. "Your people think in straight lines," Nova explained as they worked together to restore the ship's power systems. "You see a problem and build a solution. My people thought in circles. We became one with our solutions." Morrison nodded as he watched damaged systems heal themselves. Under his guidance, the ship's biomechanical repair systems spread through the vessel like roots through soil. Broken walls sealed themselves. Dead circuits came back to life. The eternal dream was waking up after centuries of sleep. But waking, the ship created new problems. Morrison's crew was still lost in the changing corridors, and the ship's defense systems had started to see them as invaders. Amy and Danny were trapped in a section that had sealed itself off, while Lisa was dealing with security drones that followed her through the halls. "Nova, you need to help my people," Morrison said urgently. "They're not enemies." "I know," Nova replied, her mental voice strained. "But the ship's automatic systems don't understand. They see unknown life forms and react as they were programmed to do. I am trying to override them, but it is difficult. I have been alone so long, I had forgotten how to think about others. Morrison felt Nova's struggle through their connection. She was trying to change systems that had been running the same way for hundreds of years. It was like trying to teach an old dog new tricks, except the dog was the size of a city and could kill people if it made a mistake. "Let me help," Morrison said. "Show me how to talk to the ship directly." Nova hesitated. "It could be dangerous. If you connect too deeply, you might lose yourself in the ship's consciousness. You could become part of it forever." Morrison thought about his crew, trapped and scared somewhere in the ship's depths. "It's a risk I have to take." Nova guided Morrison deeper into their connection. Suddenly he could feel every part of the ship at once, the power flowing through its veins, the air moving through its lungs. The thoughts of the crew members it was tracking. It was overwhelming, like trying to see through 1,000 eyes at once. But Morrison was stubborn, and he was human. Instead of getting lost in the ship's vast consciousness, he imposed his own will on it. He thought about his crew, as friends, not threats. He remembered Lisa's loyalty, Danny's cheerful jokes, Amy's protective nature. Through the connection, Nova felt these emotions and began to understand. Slowly, the ship's defenses stood down. Sealed doors opened. Security drones powered off. Morrison felt his crew's relief as they found their way back to safe areas of the ship. "How did you do that?" Nova asked, amazed. "I have been trying to change those systems for hours." "You were trying to reprogram them," Morrison explained. "I just convinced them to see things differently. Sometimes the direct approach works better than the elegant one." Through their link, Morrison felt Nova's fascination with human thinking. Her people had been logical and methodical, but Morrison's approach was intuitive and emotional. He made decisions based on feelings as much as facts, and somehow it worked. As the ship continued to heal itself, Morrison and Nova worked together to restore more systems. The communication arrays came online, allowing Morrison to contact his crew directly. The navigation systems awakened, showing star maps that covered galaxies humans had never explored. Weapon systems that could tear holes in space itself hummed to life. But the most important change was in Nova herself. The dying, lonely consciousness Morrison had found was growing stronger. Her form in the crystal chamber became more solid, more real. Her mental voice grew clearer and more confident. "I can feel them," Nova said suddenly, her voice filled with fear. "The Devourers. They're coming." Morrison felt it too, now that he was connected to the ship's long-range sensors. Something dark was moving through space toward them, leaving empty void in its wake. The enemy that had destroyed Nova's entire civilization was only days away. "How many?" Morrison asked. "A scouting force. Perhaps 50 ships, but each one is capable of devouring an entire world." Morrison felt fear, but also determination. Through their connection, Nova felt his emotions and was amazed by them. Where her people would have calculated odds and made logical decisions about retreat, Morrison was already planning to fight. "We need to get my crew back to our ship," Morrison said. "Then we need to call for help." "Help?" Nova asked. "Your people cannot fight the Devourers. No one has ever defeated them. No one has ever had a living ship on their side before," Morrison replied. "And no one has ever had humans fighting alongside Zephyrians." Nova felt Morrison's confidence through their link, and for the first time in centuries, she began to hope. Not just hope for survival, but hope for victory. Morrison's human stubbornness was infectious, and Nova found herself believing that maybe, just maybe, they could win. "What do we do?" Nova asked. Morrison smiled, even though she couldn't see. "We wake up the rest of your people." "What do you mean? You said their consciousness faded, but you didn't say it was gone. If this ship is alive, if it's made from their life force, then part of them is still here. We just need to give them a reason to come back." Through their connection, Nova felt Morrison's certainty. He believed that the other Zephyrian spirits could be awakened, that the ship could become truly alive again. It was a crazy idea, but Nova was beginning to understand that crazy ideas were what humans did best. Together they began reaching out to the sleeping corners of the ship, calling to the faded spirits of Nova's people. And slowly, carefully, the dead began to answer. Morrison and Nova worked together to wake the sleeping spirits of her people. It wasn't easy. The Zephyrian consciousness had been fading for centuries, their voices growing weaker with each passing year. But Morrison's human stubbornness refused to accept that they were truly gone. "Talk to them the way you talk to me," Morrison suggested as they reached out through the ship's systems. "Show them hope. Show them that someone still cares." Slowly, carefully, other voices began to answer their call. Faint at first, like whispers in the dark, but growing stronger as Morrison's life force fed into the ship's systems. The Eternal. Dream began to truly live again, not just as Nova's consciousness but as the combined will of hundreds of Zephyrian spirits. The ship transformed around them. Corridors that had been dark for centuries filled with light. Systems that had been barely functioning roared back to life. Weapons that could tear reality itself began charging their power cells. The Eternal. Dream was no longer a dying ghost ship. It was a living weapon, angry and ready for revenge. But their awakening came just in time. Long-range sensors detected the Devourer fleet dropping out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. 50 ships, each one the size of a small moon, began moving toward them with deadly purpose. Morrison's crew had made it back to the Lucky Strike, but Morrison stayed aboard the Eternal Dream. Through his link with Nova, he could control the alien ship's systems better than any computer. He was no longer just a salvage captain. He was the bridge between two civilizations, human and Zephyrian, living and dead. "Captain," Lisa's voice crackled over the comm from the Lucky Strike. "We've sent out distress signals to every human ship in 3 sectors. Help is coming, but it won't be here for hours." Morrison looked at the tactical display showing the approaching Devourer fleet. Hours they didn't have. The enemy would be on them in minutes. "Then we make our stand here," Morrison said simply. Through the ship's systems, Morrison felt Nova's fear. She had seen the Devourers destroy her entire civilization. She knew what they were capable of, but she also felt Morrison's determination, his absolute refusal to give up, and it gave her strength. "My people are with us," Nova said, her mental voice now joined by dozens of others. The awakened Zephyrian spirit spoke as one. "We will not run again. We will not hide. Today, we fight." The first Devourer ship entered weapons range, and Morrison felt the Eternal Dream's guns charge up. But these weren't normal weapons. They were powered by the combined will and anger of an entire dead race, focused through human determination and stubbornness. Morrison fired. The beam that lanced out from the Eternal Dream didn't just destroy the Devourer ship. It unmade it, sending it screaming back into the void from which it came. For the first time in galactic history, a Devourer had been not just defeated, but completely destroyed. The other Devourers paused, confused. This had never happened before. They were the ones who destroyed, who consumed, who unmade reality. They didn't know how to react to being hurt. Morrison didn't give them time to figure it out. Working with Nova and the awakened Zephyrian spirits, he turned the Eternal Dream into a weapon of pure vengeance. The ship danced through space, its living systems adapting and changing faster than the Devourers could track. But 50 against 1 was still terrible odds, even with the ship's incredible power. The Devourers began to adapt, learning from their first defeat. They spread out, trying to surround the Eternal Dream and attack from all sides. Morrison felt desperation creeping in. They were fighting better than anyone had ever fought the Devourers before, but it might not be enough. Then, he heard something that made his heart leap with hope. "Captain Morrison, this is Admiral Clark of the Human Fleet. We received your distress call. We're dropping out of hyperspace now." Morrison looked at his sensors and felt like cheering. 30 human ships were appearing at the edge of the system, racing toward the battle at full speed. It wasn't a huge fleet, but it was help. "Admiral," Morrison called over the comm. "These things eat energy and matter. Don't use your main guns on them. Use kinetic weapons, solid projectiles, anything that's just dumb metal flying fast." "Understood, Captain. All ships switch to railguns and missile bombardment. Let's show these things what humans do to bullies." The human fleet hit the Devourers from behind, just as Morrison and Nova were being overwhelmed. Railgun slugs and nuclear missiles tore into the alien ships, doing damage that confused the Devourers even more. They were used to fighting energy, weapons, and exotic technology. Simple, brutal human weapons were something they hadn't prepared for. Working together, the human fleet and the Eternal Dream began to turn the tide. Morrison coordinated the battle through his link with Nova, using the ship's advanced sensors to guide human weapons to their targets. The Zephyrian spirits provided knowledge of Devourer weaknesses that had been learned through centuries of war. But the real advantage was something neither race had possessed alone: human adaptability combined with Zephyrian wisdom. Brutal pragmatism merged with elegant science. The Devourers found themselves facing an enemy that broke every rule they understood about warfare. One by one, the Devourer ships fell, not consumed or absorbed, but truly destroyed, their essence scattered into the void. When the last ship exploded in a flash of dark energy, Morrison felt a cheer go up from both the human fleet and the awakened Zephyrian spirits. They had done the impossible. They had defeated the Devourers. In the aftermath, Morrison stood in the crystal chamber with Nova, who now appeared solid and real. The awakened spirits of her people filled the ship with light and laughter for the first time in centuries. "What happens now?" Morrison asked. "Now we make sure this never happens." Again, Nova replied, "Your people have shown mine something we had forgotten, that sometimes the best way to preserve life is to fight for it." Morrison nodded. Through their connection, he could feel the possibilities stretching out before them. Human ships equipped with Zephyrian technology, crews trained in both human tactics and alien science, a fleet dedicated to protecting other civilizations from the darkness between the stars. "The Eternal Dream will not travel alone anymore," Nova said. "We will teach your people our knowledge, and you will teach us your courage. Together we will make sure that no other race faces extinction while we exist to prevent it." Morrison looked out at the human fleet, already beginning to form up around the Eternal Dream. Earth would receive their message soon, a simple transmission that would change everything. "We found something out here," Morrison said into his communicator. "We found our purpose among the stars. We found each other."